Welcome to the Joy of Cruising podcast with your host, award-winning author Paul C. Thornton, a weekly conversation with the amazing cruisers featured in the Joy of Cruising books, comprised of The Joy of Cruising, Cruising Interrupted, new release, The Joy of Cruising Again, as well as other fun, informative global cruise personalities. It's the next best thing to cruising, hearing about cruising from the unique and diverse perspectives of Paul's amazing guests. If you hear about a cruise that interests you, book it at www.thejoyoфvacation.com or enter to win a free cruise for two. Again, www.thejoyoфvacation.com. We really appreciate your feedback, so leave us a text. Paul can't reply, but he may read your text on the air.
Hello, passionate cruisers. This is Paul, and I am delighted to welcome this week on the Joy of Cruising podcast, Melissa Newman, a university professor who loves to cruise. For most of her life, she held two full-time jobs, serving as professor and also running a nonprofit organization. In 2022, she decided to stop letting work dominate her life, and she exited the nonprofit sector and used her newly found free time to pursue one of her passions, travel, and specifically cruise travel. She now cruises monthly and creates content to share with others what she learns along the way, which is the perfect marriage of her job and hobby, teaching and cruising. Professor Melissa and I share two significant things in common. We both have been university professors and are certified travel agents, so I'm anxious to hear how those backgrounds mix or collide to create challenges and opportunities for Melissa. Welcome, Melissa, to the Joy of Cruising podcast.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great. A little tired from just getting back from a cruise, but, feeling well relaxed and rested.
Well, just getting back from a cruise, that's I kind of have mixed feelings. That's sort of it's nice to be home, but it's sad to be off the cruise. So what did you go on?
I did a Virgin Voyages cruise on Valiant Lady. So it was my first solo cruise in a while. I do all kinds of cruises with my boyfriend, with my kids, with my friends, but I hadn't done a solo cruise in about a year and a half. So figured it's time to do one. And it was nice. It was nice, more relaxing than usual.
I don't suspect that was your first time on Virgin.
No, I've sailed Virgin before. And actually my one and only tattoo is I got on Scarlet Lady. But it's been a while since I sailed Virgin, and I like Virgin a lot, but the reason I don't sail them more often is they kind of have limited itineraries. They're new, but as they grow and have more offerings, I'll probably sail them more often.
Yeah, I've only sailed Virgin once, Scarlet Lady, like you, and I do have it booked. I have Brilliant Lady booked. But yeah, it's funny about your tattoo. When we were on Scarlet Lady, I went with my wife to the tattoo parlor like literally every day, looking around, and I kept waiting for her to ask me, "What are you doing?" But she never came. She never asked me that. I did not buy a tattoo. I was interested, but they had real tiny ones, like the one you have on your wrist, and that's nice. Then that's about all I could afford, because the bigger ones, the ones that I was really interested in, they were like crazy money. So I said, well, maybe next time I'm on Virgin. But anyway, I just kind of jumped right into cruising. Let's go back to the beginning. I think I asked you how you doing. Now, you are a university professor. May I ask, what do you teach?
Teach business at the University of Cincinnati. And so what actually compels me about cruising is I'm kind of obsessed with the business side of it. So every time I cruise, I'm always thinking the business part of it. I'm kind of a nerd.
So are you still in education, or have you put that aside?
No, I'm a full-time professor, and people are shocked. They think that cruising is my full-time job. But I'm very lucky that I've built enough reputation and credibility in my academic career that I now have the freedom and flexibility to ask for remote teaching. And we do a lot more online courses post-COVID. So this whole academic year, I am all online. So I was on my cruise ship, a Valiant Lady, last week, grading and responding to students and doing my job from a cruise ship.
Yeah, I have a pass as a university professor, and I did teach online sometimes, and I loved it. And I do recall one cruise where I had to grade papers during the cruise. So leading up to your education career, and let me say this right now, Melissa, you have to forgive the frog in my voice. I'm battling a cold, so I may sound a little different than I normally sound. But anyway, leading up to your education career, tell our listeners about yourself in general. Where you're from, where do you live? I think you told us Cincinnati. Your background, your entree into education. Anything else you would like to
Oh, that's a
share?
lot in one question, Paul. Yes, I grew up in.
In other words, we want to hear your life story.
Okay, well, I'll try to tell it to you briefly because I'm a yapper. So grew up, born and raised in the Cincinnati area. Had kind of a tough upbringing, a childhood cancer survivor. Didn't have a lot of money growing up. Didn't get to travel. We were lucky if we got to go to the local amusement park once a year or every other year. It's kind of like our vacation. So I never really got to travel or explore the world. And in fact, I didn't even get my passport. Actually, I just renewed it last night, fun fact, until 10 years ago, which is crazy, actually 9.5 years ago. So I was in my 30s, no, wait, late 20s. Forget how old I am. We don't want to talk about that though, Paul. But
Nah, nah.
in recent years, I just got my passport for the first time and started traveling and realized, wow, I love this. And for me, it's, the excitement of learning. I just love learning about people and cultures and how other people live. And it really changes your worldview and changes your life when you get out and start traveling. But unfortunately, I didn't have a lot of time to travel because for my entire life, I actually had two full-time jobs. I was university professor and I also ran a nonprofit organization. So it was crazy. And as being a mom of two kids too, I had terrible work-life balance. It was bad. And so about 3 years ago, made some major changes, exited the nonprofit sector and became just a university professor and realized, wow, I actually have some time now to travel. And I, believe it or not, didn't take my first cruise until 2017. So I'm kind of a newer cruiser, which is crazy. And I realized with cruising, I loved cruising, but for me, it was the cost effectiveness of it and the business aspect and how amazing it is and easy and efficient to have a nice night, watch some free entertainment, have some good food, a sit down dinner that you didn't have to plan for. And then you go to bed and you wake up the next morning in a new country. It's amazing. So I realized that when it comes to traveling, cruising is kind of the move. And so started cruising more and then started asking for more online classes. The university was kind enough to accommodate that. And so the last year has been wild. I've taken a cruise at least once a month, holding down my job while doing it. And then I started making content about it just this year and it kind of exploded, which is fun and wild and crazy. But yeah, it's been a really interesting year.
We'll be right back.
The Joy of Cruising podcast guests receive a gift sponsored by GigSky of a 3 gigabyte cruise plus land data package valued at $60. Relying on ship Wi-Fi is slow, unsecure, and sometimes not available. And at foreign ports, travelers don't want to pay their carriers high fees. GigSky provides a solution that will save them a significant amount of money. To get your own data package usable on the ship or in ports, here is my link to GigSky. https://gigsky.pxf.io/NLOXOR. This can be found in the show notes below. For a 10% discount, use the code Joy of Cruising.
So let's go back to that first cruise. Talk about your first cruise. What ship was it? I think you told us when it was, but tell us the ship. What were your initial impressions?
Yeah, so that's actually a great question because it was on Carnival Paradise and my sister initiated it. And I had never really thought much about cruising. I wasn't opposed to it, but I don't know, it just wasn't on my radar, I guess. But I wanted to really jump at the opportunity to travel as a family because we had never done that. And my kids are really close to her kids, cousins and all of that. And my mom and stepdad were going to go. And so somehow she figured cruising was the way to do it. So I'm like, okay, this sounds fun. I'll give it a try. I've never taken a cruise. And so we took the cruise. And what's interesting is I look back at it now, and I really try in my content to educate people about having realistic expectations. I had heard from people that had cruised like back in the 90s, like, oh, it's like black tie and every meal is 5-star and they have like white glove service. And I had this just very unrealistic expectation of what cruising was going to be. And I'm not sure if you caught the ship, but it was Carnival Paradise. And I love Carnival, but Paradise is an old, small ship. It's not the nicest. Every cruise is a good cruise, but it was on Paradise. Let's just say that. And I remember actually being a little disappointed because people had hyped up cruising is to be this mecca of like 5-star experience. And so I remember, oh my gosh, I actually like look kind of side eye people like this now that complain about everything cruising. I was one of those people, I'll admit it. I filled out that survey and I was like, dinner was really slow and it took, 2 hours in the MDR every night and the food quality, it wasn't the best. And now that I'm such a seasoned cruiser, I look back and I'm like, oh my gosh, I just had a way skewed set of expectations compared to what reality is. And now that I've cruised so much, yes, Carnival Paradise is never going to be the creme de la creme. And fun fact, I actually sailed Paradise again this summer. Talk about nostalgia. And it's hard to go back to those old small ships when you're spoiled on the big new ships. But I really want cruisers to know, first timers, don't go into it. I think back in the 90s, and I never cruised then, the midnight buffets and the ice sculptures and wearing black tie all the time. It's not like that anymore. And that doesn't mean cruising is not amazing and wonderful. Obviously, I think it is, but it's just different now. And people have to have realistic expectations.
So, what was the next cruise ship you went on after Carnival Paradise?
So I actually had a big gap. So it was about a year. And, again, I came home and I was kind of like, that wasn't what I expected. I don't know if I loved it because, again, I had that really distorted perception of what it was going to be versus what reality was. But then started talking to my sister again. And we're like, you know what? Actually, now that we think about it, it was really fun. And it was easier traveling with kids and as families and the free childcare. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. So we're like, let's give it another whirl. And the kids did like the fun aspects of Carnival. So we went with Carnival again about a year later. So, 2018, and had more realistic expectations this time. And I think we were on, it was another older, smaller Carnival ship. But it wasn't Paradise, it was a different one. And I had a pretty good time this time. So, from 2017 up until COVID, I probably took basically just one cruise a year, nothing crazy. And it was really after COVID that I think all of us really realized, wow, when we weren't able to travel for so long and how much we love travel, I kind of went crazy of like, I need to see the world because you never know. You can't take for granted. There might be another pandemic. There might be things that happen, that might shut down the world. Who knows? And so I wanted to get out and travel as much as I could. And the more I did it, the more I loved it. And it just kind of snowballed from there.
So, what were some of the cruises you took in the early days before the COVID lockdown?
Yeah, so I mostly sailed Carnival on family trips. And what's really funny is I actually took a cruise in February of 2020. And this was with my best friend, and it was on Celebrity. And I remember at this time, we started hearing about this, virus. And I had a sign.
Melissa, if I could interrupt, which celebrity?
Let me pull up my handy shipmate app And no, I'm not sponsored. I just love Shipmate. When you take as many cruises as I do, they blend together. So I always have to go back and look. And it's really handy to have that. It was Infinity,
Okay.
Celebrity
Okay.
Infinity. So it was smaller. Yeah. And I remember I had a sinus infection. So kind of like you're a little froggy. And they, at this point, they were taking temperature. And it was the first time I'd had my temperature taken to do something. And I kind of had a cough. And I'm like, oh man, I have to like hold it back because I don't want them to deny us boarding on this cruise. And it was like a short little, it's like a short weekend cruise on an older celebrity ship. And it was a good time. But who knew that was going to be my last trip, period, for like a year. So that was an interesting moment because it was not even 3 weeks after that things really started shutting down.
That brought you to an interesting point in your life. No cruising, which we all experience, and also you were a professor, and I was still a professor at that time. So we went to. Actually, I wasn't a professor at the time. I was an administrator, but my organization we conducted classes for working adults. So it wasn't classes for college credit. So we immediately moved to online, and we had to kind of reimagine ourselves as an online provider of education for adults. So that was a challenge. It was a exciting challenge, but it was a challenge nevertheless. But beyond that, I was climbing the walls as far as not being able to go out of the house. What was it like for you as a professor?
It was tough because we did have to pivot. I've always taught some classes online, but I've always really relished the in-person experience. And I think that's where I really shine. And we did have to, in March, just stop cold and with zero preparation time, pivot online. And it was easier for me because I'm tech savvy, I'm younger. I'm familiar with, teaching online. So, it was abrupt. Probably the hardest part for me was my kids switching to online school. My youngest was only in kindergarten, and oh my God, it was nightmarish trying to deal with homeschooling kids basically as a single parent too. And then in the fall, I actually went back, believe it or not, even in fall of 2020 in person. We had very limited in-person classes because I am younger faculty, it was like lower risk. So I'm like, I'll teach in person, nothing crazy. Like I think I did one in-person class Tuesday, Thursday, and we were socially distanced and masked. And actually took my students outside, and we did a lot of fun, like exercises and stuff outside, experiential hands-on stuff. And yeah, so it was rough and not being able to travel. And so as soon as things started to come, go back to normal and open back up, I think it was October of 21, I took my first post-COVID cruise on Carnival Sunrise. Clearly, you're probably sensing a pattern. I like Carnival, even though I wasn't too impressed with my very first one. And I still love Carnival, but I do try to diversify. But my kids love Carnival. So we did a Halloween cruise, and that was really fun.
You at that point you didn't have the Professor Melissa brand that hadn't been formed yet, right?
Right. That's new. It's like I said, it's been a whirlwind of a year. I mean, I've been a professor named Melissa, but as an actual personal brand, no.
Okay, so a lot of brands and influencers and content creators, what have you, went on a just a binge of cruising once the startup occurred. They went on cruise after cruise, kind of making up for lost time. Did you do that, or did you kind of ease into it?
Well, I kind of had to ease into it because at the time I was still working full time for a nonprofit, so I didn't have the time.
Okay.
I love to travel. If I had the time, I would have not, even though I wasn't doing any content at that time at all. But I could just really kind of strategically schedule trips, and I did some land trips too when I could, but had it scheduled around like my fall break, my kids' fall break, and then my nonprofit when it wasn't peak event season. So it was really hard to get the timing right. So it just so happened that, this year has really been the first time in my life where my kids are a little older now. They're more self-sufficient. I have flexibility with my profession. I don't have two jobs. I have one and it's online. So I'm going to take advantage of it while I can. And so that's when I started going on my travel binge, and I started making content just for fun and to help people. And as an educator, I just love teaching what I learn and being open about the mistakes that I make. And my content, anytime I would post anything cruise, it just like blew up. And I'm like, people like really love to hear cruising stuff from me. So I started making more of it. And then finally, in the start of this year, I had a couple of TikToks go kind of mega viral. And then the business part of me is like, can I turn this into a business? And so that's been my focus in 2024, and to get to marry my love of travel and cruising with my other love of business, and creating value and helping people. It's been a dream come true.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned that binge that you went on, kind of delayed binge after the pandemic. Well, what are some of the cruises that you went on during that hot streak?
Probably the one that also helped trigger and set off my cruise binge, because I figured out an important little cruise hack, is my best friend who I had sailed that pre-COVID right back in February of 2020. She invited me on Holland America Line on an Alaskan cruise in September. I guess it would have been 22, maybe. Yeah. And I was like, heck yeah, not only a cruise, but a free cruise, because she's a casino player. So she had taken a cruise with her family, played in the casino. I've never been a casino person. I still think casinos are stupid and waste of money. But she played in the casino, and they'd offered her, this was the real heyday, right? Post COVID, cruise lines are trying to make up for all that lost business. They're really offering freebies to casino players. And I'm like, oh my God, Alaska is a bucket list. Heck yeah. So I went with her on this cruise, and I'm like, teach me the ways. You got this for free? This like 8-day Alaskan cruise. How to do it? She's like, there's not much to it. You just play in the casino and you make sure that you use your room card, like in slots, or that they know you're playing if you're playing table games. And I'm like, okay. And I only spent maybe 250, $300, not even knowing what I was doing. I was like hitting the button on the slot machine. Like, this is dumb. It's a waste of money. But then I come home and I had a free offer from Holland America Line. And I'm like, oh my God, it worked. And so that's how I started leveraging the cruise casino program so I could cruise for free. And I figured out a system of how to take one offer and parlay that into matching offers from competing cruise lines. So then now I sail a lot of different cruise lines, and not just kind of stuck with Carnival. As much as I love Carnival, I do like to diversify. And then I also try to share what I've learned with other cruisers so they can kind of tap into the system too.
What Holland America ship was that?
That was on Westerdam.
Westerdam, okay. I'm curious only because I go on my first Holland America cruise in a couple of months. So
which one are you doing?
We're doing New Amsterdam.
That's my New Year's cruise. I've been on New Amsterdam too, but I'll be on that's my next cruise, December 29th.
Oh, okay. So we probably get on. No, we're later in January. I was going to say we probably get on when you get off.
Oh my gosh.
But it's a very special cruise. I actually had planned my first Holland America cruise. It was checking off some bucket list items. I was going to go to the Panama Canal. So it would have been my first Panama Canal cruise, and it would have been my first Holland America cruise. And it was on their flagship, Rotterdam. But then the opportunity came up to go. This January cruise is a Soul Train cruise. It's a theme cruise.
Oh, yeah.
And that's like really a bucket list item. So we're going to go on that. And then the Panama Canal cruise would have embarked the day the New Amsterdam cruise disembarks. So that's too much together. So I pushed the Rotterdam Panama Canal cruise to later in the year. So
okay, hold on. You're not going to believe this. I kid you not. I'm actually going to be on Holland America on Panama Canal in 2025 on Rotterdam, December 7th.
December 7th? We'll
Yeah.
miss you. Yeah, we going. Can't remember the exact date, but it's sometime in October.
Oh, so you're ahead of me. Yeah, that's a
Yep,
bucket
yep.
list for me too. I had it booked too, and was gonna do it solo. But then my best friend was like, if you push back to next year, I'll come with you. So I'm like, okay, I'll push it back.
Okay.
So well, it's so funny. So you've never sailed Holland before?
No, so how'd you like it? You sailed, sounds like you sailed it several times.
Yeah, my longest cruise this summer, I did a European on Holland. It was 2 weeks. Um, Holland, people sleep on Holland. It's not as like well known as well loved. There's a lot of perception that it's old people, and I'm not gonna lie, it is. It skews very old, especially Alaska. Oh my gosh, on this Alaskan cruise, my best friend and I were like children, and the average age was up there. Um, but they are fun. The big draw for me for Holland, and I don't like that they've started scaling this back. So I also like kind of like soul music and hip hop and R&B. They have an amazing live band, which is BB King's, and I'm obsessed. They always have the most talented performers. I'm actually friends with a bunch of them now because I've sailed Holland so much, and I'm always in BB King's, dancing and singing and having a good time. And unfortunately, they're starting to get rid of BB King's and merge it with Rolling Stone Lounge, which they claim is still the same, but it's not. It's lost that kind of soul flavor.
Hmm.
And so I really don't like that. And I'll probably sail less with Holland because of it. But I like Holland a lot.
Well, you would like just listening to you, I suspect you would like the Soul Train cruise. So we'll be doing a podcast on that in early February, just kind of giving our reflections. So,
Yeah, I'll tune in for that.
yep. You talked a little bit about your motivation, but say some more. Talk about the creation of the Professor Melissa brand.
Yeah, so Professor Melissa was just my handle, my username, because I'm a professor named Melissa, but it wasn't, a quote brand. And, as I mentioned in January, I had a couple TikToks, cruise TikToks that really went viral. And at the time, TikTok had introduced a creator fund, and I had hit enough of a following that I automatically qualified for that. So one day I was on a cruise with my boyfriend and I log into TikTok. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I've made like $2,000 in like just from these TikToks that I already make. This could be potentially very lucrative. And again, I'm already doing it, but if I can make money doing it and continue to help people, which I absolutely love, and that was and still is my number one motivation, then why the heck not? So again, business professor wheels started turning. I'm like, okay, how can I turn this into an actual business? And so I launched my blog, started making content more consistently and coming up with strategy. So, I teach business, but specifically I teach management. But my bachelor's degree and my first love in business is marketing. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to really harness the social media thing and figure out how to like turn this into a business. And so I have never worked as hard as I have as I have in 2024. And it's funny because people see my life, my friends in real life, and then my online friends, and they're like, girl, you've hacked life. You're living the dream. You're cruising all the time. And they see this like fun, carefree, living the dream. And it is. I'm so grateful and thankful. I have the best life ever that I've built for myself. But I will tell you, Paul, I work my tail off. There's
Hmm.
so much work. You do a podcast. People have no idea. They listen to, a 45-minute episode. They don't know the hours of like planning and in advance and prep and then editing and
Sure.
promotion. There's a lot to it. And so that's kind of a misconception.
Well, I tell you, you've done a good job of building that life. You certainly caught my attention, and I reached out to you. You just seemed like you had, a cruising story that the average cruiser might like to listen to. And plus, we have some things in common coming from academia. It seems more and more content creators and influencers are organizing group cruises. Have you done that, or are you planning to do something like that in the future, near future?
Yeah, so I actually just launched about a month ago my first group cruise. I picked a cruise I was already going to take because I'm like, I don't want the pressure because if it's a big failure, I don't want to like be forced to go on a cruise I don't want to go on. So I already had Carnival Jubilee booked because Carnival is my favorite cruise line and Jubilee is their newest ship and it's the only Excel class of theirs I haven't sailed yet. And Mardi Gras and Celebration are my two favorite ships. So I'm like, I got to do Jubilee. And I've also only cruised out of Galveston once. And so I want to go back and I have some friends that live there. And so I'm like, you know what? Let's just call this a group cruise. And I'm already going to go. I already have my room booked. And so I kind of set that up. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. I am excited to do a formal meet and greet. I've never done that before. I have gotten to the point where when I cruise, people do recognize me and they say hello, and I love chatting with folks and stuff. But this will be like my first time on a cruise where it's a formal event of interacting with people. So I'm looking forward to that. So that's in April.
That's April of this year, coming up to 25.
April 5th through 12th. Yeah.
Do you still have availability?
I do. I kind of not a mistake, I would say, but it's a learning. But I kind of realized that usually these are done a little further in advance. So, and Jubilee is a popular ship, so I am pretty limited on, I guess, the spaces. So I've unfortunately had some folks that we didn't have the room type that they really wanted, or they couldn't plan with that short of notice. See, for me, April's miles away. I'm used to I've jumped on a cruise before with 24 hours notice.
Wow.
So I cruise differently than most people. But I forget most people need, lots of time to plan for work and childcare and stuff. So there is some availability, but it is increasingly more limited as the days go by. But if I do another group cruise, it'll be much further out. It'll be making sure I have like a dedicated block where I have a lot of different room types available for folks.
Well, for the listeners, do a little commercial. What's the itinerary? How do they contact you if they might be interested? Let's see if we can get you a couple more guests.
Yeah, so I have a website set up to answer all the questions. It's cruisewithprofmelissa.com. And it is the Western Caribbean itinerary, which I just sailed on Mardi Gras, and I love it. It's Cozumel, which is one of my favorites. It's Roatan, which is not a as popular cruise port, but there's so much to offer. And in Roatan, I got to check off a huge bucket list the first time I went, and I did it again a few weeks ago when I went, which is to hold a sloth. I mean, it was so cool. I like to interact with the monkeys and the sloths and the iguanas, and they have great chocolate and rum tastings and things like that. So it's April 5th through the 12th, and I think Belize is our other stop. Let me make sure I have that right, because like I said, I have 9 cruises booked. So
we'll get to that.
That's probably what your itinerary looks like too. Costa Maya, that's it, not Belize, Costa Maya, which I've really come around on Costa Maya. I used to be a little bit of a Costa Maya hater until I just went a few weeks ago and I found my spot. I'm telling you, when you go to a cruise port and you find your spot, then you like it all of a sudden. And that's what I tell cruisers. Sometimes they'll say, oh, I'm going to such and such port and I'm not going to get off the ship because I've been there before and I hated it. I said, well, give it another chance, because maybe you just didn't go somewhere or do something that was enjoyable. And maybe this time you will. So it's a really nice itinerary, beautiful ship. The Carnival Excel class ship, I think, are just top tier. And the food is just really, really good too. So yeah, love for folks to join me.
Anything else you want to tell the listeners? Is any kind of incentive or?
Yeah, we're going to do 2 meet and greets. So one of them is going to be in the casino, where I'm going to personally teach one of my favorite subjects aside from business, which is how to game the casino system as much as possible, right? You can't fully game a casino system. But people ask me all the time, how do you afford to cruise so much? And I'm like, I get free cruises and this is how I do it. And while spending the minimum, because you do have to, invest in the casino. So I'm going to help teach people in person. And I have a YouTube video that's like 30 minutes that explains all the ins and outs of it. But we're going to be in person. I'm just going to kind of talk through and answer questions there too. And the thing I want people to know too is it doesn't cost anything extra. A lot of times people think these group cruises or using a travel agent, because we do have to book you to be part of the group, they have these weird ideas that they think it's going to cost a lot more. It's exactly the same price. It doesn't cost you anything extra. And it is an awesome ship and an awesome itinerary.
Great, great. Talk about the future. You said you had, 9 cruises booked. Let's hear the good stuff.
Yeah, so I'm trying to get my bucket list checked off, just like you. Panama Canal, that's a big one. I've been to Hawaii
Mm-hmm.
before, but I have a Carnival Journeys, I think it's 15-day in Hawaii, that I'm excited. That's going to challenge me though, because that's a lot of sea days. And I used to hate sea days. I get easily bored. I've come around to actually really enjoying them now, but it's a lot of consecutive sea days. So I'm going to see how I survive that one. And then the one I really want to do, and I will tell you, Paul, when you get on Holland, the great thing about Holland is they have some killer itineraries like Panama. I think their itineraries are more interesting and exotic than most of the other cruise lines, which is why I love them. And they have an
Oh,
Antarctica
wow.
itinerary that I so badly want to do. And they've offered it to me free, but I've had to pass it up because the dates have just never worked for me, unfortunately. They're really long sailings. And even a 14-day is hard for me. I do have kids. So, childcare aspect is difficult and being away from life for over 2 weeks. But Paul, you got to play in the casino
So,
on your ship and get those free Holland offers.
so they offered it to you free. Was that a casino offer, or was that because you are a successful cruise influencer?
Casino offers. I do not do sponsored cruises. And now I'm not going to say if, say Royal Caribbean were to come and say, Melissa, we're going to put you in the grandest suite on Icon of the Seas if you make content. I probably would do it. I'm not going to lie. But by and large, I already cruise free and I have more free cruises than I can take. And I like being independent. I like not being forced to make content because sometimes I don't feel it. I'm not in the mood. And I'm never going to lie. Never going to lie. If I have a not great experience, I am going to tell people about it. And I think that's what my audience appreciates is that I am always honest. And I'll tell you the downside, I'll tell you the upside, and I'll tell you my thoughts on it. And I also try to be open-minded because sometimes I don't love something like Costa Maya. I did not like my first visit to Costa Maya. I loved my last visit a few weeks ago. MSC, I used to be the biggest MSC hater. And I still say, never sail an old MSC ship. Stay away from Magnifica because it ain't
Mm-hmm.
Magnifica. But MSC's new ships, they're pretty darn good. And their private island's amazing. So I think people know that they can trust me when I say something. It's not because I'm being paid to say it, but it is my real thoughts and opinions.
I got a feeling, Melissa, that we're going to get you some new new listeners or followers, I should say, because like me, I suspect a lot of other cruisers are intrigued about the casino offers. And, I've had a couple of guests who've alluded to it, but, you have spoken about it in such a way that it sounds like many of your cruises are free. And that's going to get the wheels turning in a lot of folks' head. I wouldn't be surprised if you see an uptick in your followership. So, because I'm curious as well. How to swing that free casino deal. I've never gone on a cruise. I've gone on a free cruise, but I've never gone on a free cruise because of casino.
Yeah. There's a huge watch out, right? You have to be super disciplined. And I am not always. I will tell you, my charges from my Virgin cruise just hit my bank account today, and it was an ouch. I spent way more in the casino than I would have if I just bought the room. So, but in comparison, on Mardi Gras, my cruise prior to that, I walked away with over $3,000 in my pocket. That's very, very, very rare.
Wow.
So, I just want people to know, you have to be disciplined. If you have any type of addictive personality or tendencies, steer clear, because it is very addictive. And I do not encourage gambling. I think gambling is stupid. I'm usually coming home from a cruise like, oh my God, you're an idiot. You spent way too much money. You should have just bought the cruise. But so it is a slippery slope and it's not for everybody. And again, a lot of times you end up spending more than you would on the cruise itself. But for me, it's entertainment. It's fun. I enjoy it. And I'm not as disciplined as I would like, but I've never, gone crazy to the point where it like affects my livelihood. Only go into it being willing to gamble what you can lose. That's my piece of advice there.
Yeah, like you, my background is finance. I taught management, I taught marketing. I mostly was finance guy, and I tell people, don't think that you can beat the casino. You can't. I don't say, use your words, the casino gambling is stupid. The only reason I actually believe it is, but I don't say that because every cruise I go in the casino and gamble. And you might say, well, that's hypocritical. He calls it stupid, but he does it. But, we look at it solely as entertainment. So we take a certain amount of money and we're okay with losing that money. And usually we're in the casino for a very short period of time because the casino will go through that money quickly. But we were in the casino Christmas, and we had taken my whole family on a Christmas cruise, and so that was quite a bit of money. I would say the fare for my wife and I, we paid for it that night in the casino. So, it's hard to say it's stupid, but on the other hand, that was sheerly luck. That's all that was. But we hit big that night. But most of the time, we know we're going to lose, and we do it anyway because it's kind of fun. Something the wife and I can do together.
Yeah. And it has changed. I don't gatekeep. A lot of people actually get mad at me. They're like, stop telling the secrets because you're going to ruin it for all of us casino players. And I'm like, if my friend wouldn't have told me, I never would have known. And, and people aren't stupid. They figure it out. But the cruise lines are tightening up. They cruising demand is through the roof right now. And so they don't have to use as much incentives to woo people in, even the casino players. So it's not the heyday of 2021, 22. So, you do kind of have to spend a little bit more. Like I said, my first Holland cruise, I only spent $200 or $300 and got a free week New Year's Eve cruise out of it. That's probably not going to happen anymore. They're tightening up, but it's still a good system if you cruise a lot and you have the right mentality about it. Okay, so speaking of casino offers, I finally scored the big one. I always talk about how I'm a little fish, right? Like I spend the bare minimum usually, but I've gotten a little out of hand. But I had this hot streak run on Mardi Gras, my cruise prior to this Virgin Voyages one. And I walked away with actually a lot of cash in my pocket and 34,000 points, which there's a point system. It gets complicated. I don't want to get into it, but I have a YouTube video about it. People can go learn. But 34,000 points is a lot. And that was enough to earn me what is called a bounce back offer. So the night before disembarkation, they'll put in your stateroom. I call them love letters. They're great to get, where the cruise line's like, hey, we are so glad you played in our casino. Come back. And it was for a free suite and drinks on us everywhere for 2 people, which I'm not a drinker for alcohol. I drink coffee. But that's like the holy grail of cruising is to get drinks on us everywhere. And so I booked Mardi Gras again for my birthday in February. And it's going to be my first time in a Carnival suite. I've done a Holland Neptune suite before for Alaska, but it'll be my first Carnival suite. So I'm excited about that. So I got my New Year's cruise on Holland. I have my birthday cruise on Mardi Gras, which is my favorite ship, and a suite. And then I have Celebrity. I have a short little Celebrity booked in later February. So I think it's Key West, which is actually a surprisingly awesome port. I just did Key West for the first time this year and was like, it's Florida. No offense to Florida. I was surprised how much I liked it. So I have a busy spring of cruising.
Yeah, I lived in Florida for several years. I was with the university there. And so we went to Key West, not on a cruise ship. Well, it was a private, small, wouldn't be characterized as a ship, but we went there on a craft, and it was a lot of fun. So do you have a cruising bucket list? Any place you want to get to that you haven't gotten to yet? Cruise or travel?
Yeah, Antarctica's still it. I want to
That's right.
get all,
You did mention that.
yeah, I want to do all 7 continents. I still have Africa, Australia, it's the A's, Africa, Australia, and Antarctica. I have Asia. So the other 3 A's I need. And probably the only way that I'll realistically get to Antarctica is on a cruise. And those are normally really expensive, which again, I've tapped into. Although I don't know if you technically, some people would say that's not technically Antarctica, because if you cruise to Antarctica on Holland, you don't actually get off and set foot on Antarctica. You kind of cruise around it. But for me, I'm like, heck yeah, that counts. That counts. I'm counting it.
Sure, it does.
Yeah, you have to do like smaller expeditions and they're really expensive to like step foot on Antarctica. I'm like sailing around it. That's going to count on my list at least. So that is a huge bucket list. I would love to start doing more cruises internationally. I had an amazing time on my Baltic cruise this summer, which is so funny. I would make content about it. People don't even know that I went to Europe on a cruise because I would make content about it and it would flop. And I'm like, do people not like to see me cruise outside of the Caribbean? It was really weird. So I'm like, I'm not going to waste my time making videos if no one's going to watch them or comment. But we did Norway, Finland, Sweden, Denmark, Germany, Estonia, the Netherlands. It was amazing. Amazing. So I want to do some of the Asian countries, like Japan. Japan would be amazing because it's intimidating for me to travel there on land because of the language barrier. But for me, cruising is less intimidating. It's so much easier and comfortable to get off and enjoy a port day, and you can be uncomfortable, but then you're back on the ship. So, and you get to see a lot of a country or continent even in a short period of time. So definitely Antarctica, Panama, which I'll be doing in December, and going through is going to be really cool and seeing the locks. But I want to do Japan too.
What do you do in your me time when you're not working on your grading papers, lesson plans, whatever, and you're not cruising?
Well, I don't have a lot of me time these days. So interesting fact, I do a lot of writing. So I write a lot on my website and I love writing port guides. So every single port I have ever visited, I have written up, and this took months to do, a detailed port guide that people can get for free on my website, profmelissa.com. So in it, I tell you, the top things to do if it's a Caribbean, what the beaches are, excursions, currency, language, like all of this kind of stuff. So I really enjoy writing. And then this time last year, I wrote my first textbook. So I was on sabbatical with the university for the purpose of writing a textbook in nonprofit management, which is my specialty at the university. And I wrote part of it on a cruise ship, but I realized I had this dream, Paul. I was like, I got my laptop, and cruise ship Wi-Fi now is pretty good. A couple years ago, it was terrible. It's good now with Starlink. And I'm going to write a textbook on a cruise ship. It's going to be so awesome. And I took a Royal Caribbean cruise. I think it was Independence of the Seas, solo. And I'm like, I'm going to get so much work done. I wrote like 3 pages. It was a big fat failure because even on a solo cruise, like people want to talk to you. And this was way before I started making content, because this was like a year and a half ago. And, you make friends and you're like, oh, I want to go to the show or see the comedian, or I don't want to bring my laptop to dinner tonight. And so I realized it sounds great in theory, but I'm just going to write that when I'm on ground at home. So I do a lot of writing, and I am fortunate too to have a really strong social network. So I try to be a good friend and catch up with all my friends that don't see me a lot. So I'm like, I'm in town. Let's do brunch. Let's do dinner. I'm here for like 4 days. Let's get this stuff done. And then of course, kid stuff keeps me super busy too.
How are your kids taking to cruising?
They like it, but they don't love it. So my oldest, I actually took her on Scarlet Lady for her 18th birthday and her high school graduation. So we got matching tattoos, mother-daughter tattoos. It's her one and only. So it was a really meaningful experience. So she likes to cruise about once a year, and she does really like Virgin. She does not like going out. We're very opposite. I'm like, let's go swim with the sharks. Let's go skydive. Let's go ATV. Let's go from 8 a.m. to midnight. And she's like, I want to chill in the room and order room service and watch TV and sit on the balcony. So we're very different.
Wow.
So for us to cruise well, I've had to agree to her terms of like, I'm not going to pressure her if she doesn't want to get off the ship on a port day. And that pains me, but I'm like, okay, I want you to enjoy this. And if that's how you like to cruise, then stay in the room and I'll go out by myself. My youngest was always my little cruising buddy. She was always down to do whatever and more like me of like trying things. But now that she's about to turn 12, she's too cool for mom. So she'll only cruise if we bring a friend along. So she doesn't give me the time of day anymore. So she'll go on about 4 cruises with me a year, but with the condition that a friend, which is usually a cousin, comes with her.
Well, before we let you go, Melissa, a couple of fun cruise questions that I like to add at the end of each interview. Give me some ideas, number one, but also give your fans and followers a little bit of insight into you. So the first question, it's an easy one. I get some great ideas. I've used the ideas I get in response to this question on almost every cruise. So, what is your favorite cruise drink and cruise food? Now, I recall you already said you're more of a coffee drinker, so turn me on even to a coffee drink.
I will. Yeah, I'm not an alcohol drinker at all. I just never cared for it. And I grew up with an alcoholic dad, so that kind of turns you off it too. But I do unfortunately have a little bit of a fancy coffee addiction. And my go-to is iced mochas. And Paul, what you're gonna love about Holland is they have this thing called the crow's nest. It's amazing. It's like up at the top of the ship, but it's enclosed. It's not like the Lido. And you can like see this beautiful panoramic 360-degree view on New Amsterdam or all their ships. And that's where their coffee shop is. And they have games and puzzles, and it's a whole vibe. I love it. It's so relaxing. So on a Holland cruise, I love going up to Crow's Nest, getting an iced mocha, playing a puzzle. Oh, I just love it. And I will say Virgin, though, I always thought Holland had the best iced mochas, but I think Virgin has now taken that crown. So you got to try iced mocha.
I have added it to my list. How about food?
Food. Okay. So this is funny. Have you heard the whole meme about how men think about the Roman Empire all the time?
No.
Do you think about the Roman Empire?
No.
Does it ever cross your mind?
No.
Okay, well, you're not like most men. That's probably a good thing.
Okay.
not just like men. But there's this joke that men think about the Roman Empire all the time. So I always say I have a couple of Roman Empire foods that just randomly pop in my head. I'll be like driving to campus and I'll think about a certain cruise food, like, oh, that was so good. So these are my Roman Empire foods. One is on Royal Caribbean. They had, oh, so good. It was like a chocolate cherry tart. So it was like a shell and then like chocolate and cherry, and it was just divine. And I had it on the last night because if I didn't have it on the last night, every night I'd have been like, do you have that chocolate cherry thing you can hook me up with? Holland America Line has an amazing bake.
Now let me stop you on that. That was Royal, you said, right? Is that in the main dining room or a specialty dining room? Okay.
Yeah, and I've sailed Royal, and it's never made another appearance. So I hope it wasn't just like one-off thing because so good. And then Holland America Line has a baked Alaska, but they only offered it in Alaska. I've had Holland Bake Alaska on other Holland cruises, but it's different. But they had a baked Alaska on the Alaska itinerary that was absolutely amazing. And then, of course, this sounds so basic, but I love Guy's Burgers on Carnival. That's part of why I love Carnival so much. It is so good. I love Guy's Burgers. So, yeah, I got my cruise foods. And each line, I have at least one thing that I really, really like.
Do you ever do specialty dining?
Yeah, I'm a steak girl. I almost always do the steakhouse.
Okay, second question. What's your most memorable or funniest or even most embarrassing cruise or port experience?
Oh, I've got a lot of them. And I actually just did a YouTube video about the craziest cruise stories ever told. But mine personally, I'd say the one that tops them all was this past February. I was on a MSC cruise. I think it was Magnifica, which is my least favorite ship of all time. And we were up on the Lido deck because I wanted to get some pictures and footage. And also I saw a Carnival ship and they were partying and having a good time. And I had FOMO. And I'm like, oh, I want to be over there. So I was up there like taking video and stuff. And my friend, she looks over and she goes, is that supposed to be there? And I turn over and I look, and there is a passenger plane that had just crashed into the water in Port Miami.
Wow.
And it's like, what? I mean, the propeller was still like kind of spinning. It was kind of like partially submerged. It had just obviously, happened like right before. And I will say, spoiler alert, thankfully, nobody was killed or seriously injured. It was a small passenger plane. There's like 5 people on it. Later, we looked it up. But it was fascinating to watch them kind of come, and it was very slow, like to tow it out of the water. But that's not something you see every day, is a plane crash right in front of you. And I was oblivious. I was so focused on like, oh, I want to be on that Carnival ship. I wasn't even looking, and I was taking pictures and video. And she's like, "What is that? Is that an airplane?"
Did you get any good pictures?
I did. I actually did a TikTok live. I'm like, oh my God, you guys, there's a plane in the water, but nobody's hurt because at that point it had hit the news. But yeah, and actually they were still pulling it out by the time we sailed away. It was a very slow process.
Wow.
So it was more exciting at first. It wasn't as exciting to watch them take, 2 hours to pull a plane out of the water. But that's something you can say, I saw a plane crash. Basically.
Yeah, that certainly goes into most memorable. There's an internet saying, photos or it didn't happen. Well, it sounds like you have photos. So
and video.
The third question, I call this an oddball question because it doesn't relate to cruising at all. Well, it doesn't necessarily have to relate to cruising at all. So Prof. Melissa, welcome to the Prof. Melissa fans and friends who are listening. Share one thing that my listeners and your fans and friends don't know about Melissa.
Oh, there's so much, because I feel like people have such a wrong idea about me, and usually like in a good way, right? Like I said, they think that my life is just this nonstop party. And so I think sometimes they're surprised to hear I don't drink, not a drinker, and that I work my tail off. So like what you see is very glossy and fun, and it is, but there's so much behind the scenes work. And then 2, I think people think that I'm just like super mega rich, and I do well. I went to college for 10 years to get 4 college degrees, including a PhD. So I've done well for myself in my career, and my business does well on the income side. But I do ball on a budget. I cruise for free. I fly Frontier. And I always look at ways to save when I'm traveling. So the funny thing is, when you're in social media, people always think, you get trolls and stuff. And my community is amazing. I love, love, love the people that I interact with on social media. They're wonderful people, and I learn so much from them. But you do get some trolls, especially when something goes viral. And people that don't know you, they just say, oh, there's an influencer. Let me say something nasty or whatever. But it's so funny because I get the comment a lot of like, get a real job. And it's like, really? Okay, first of all, I am an associate professor at an R1 research institution. I just wrote a textbook. I have 4 college degrees, including a doctorate. Or I get, what are you a professor of? Are you like, and they say it in a snide way, not a genuinely curious way. They think it's like some kind of brand or social media shtick. Like, oh, I'm teaching people to cruise. I'm like, no, I'm a legitimate professor. But it is, the work that goes into it, and, not to cry on behalf of influencers and content creators, but those that actually make a legitimate business out of it with the purpose of trying to actually help people put so much work into it. So, you can see a 20-second TikTok, and if you take one shred of value out of it, that's amazing, but that might have taken that creator hours to make. You just don't see the behind the scenes stuff. And again, I know you can relate to that because I can only imagine all the work you put into your podcast. And just because it looks easy doesn't mean it's easy.
That brings to mind, I mentioned in the intro, we have 2 things in common. Well, we've talked about one, which is the background in education, but you're also a travel agent. Say something a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I'm a very unconventional travel agent because I don't book other people. I just book myself. So again, business brain. I'm always churning and thinking, how can I maximize the things I love in life at what I can afford, right? How can I save and ball on a budget? And I realized that if I'm a travel agent, I found an amazing host agency. It's $30 a month. I can book my own trips and sometimes get a discount, but that doesn't apply so much to me because I already cruise free because of casino offers, but I get paid a commission. So even on a free Carnival cruise that I only pay port fees and taxes, I'll earn a $60 commission off that. And being a travel agent only costs me $30 a month. So I started talking about this and basically telling people, hey, if you travel a lot, you should become a travel agent. even if it's just to book your own stuff and to make commission on your own bookings. And it's really cool to have access to the back end stuff. So when I go to book a cruise, I get to see all of the stuff that I wouldn't normally get to see about stateroom categories and things and costs and all of those things. So where I've actually kind of found my niche is actually recruiting travel agents, because I realize there's so much mystery to becoming a travel agent, and there's a lot of wild misconceptions. And sometimes it looks shady because there's like people are vague about the information. So I put a lot of effort into coming up with a website, which is at profmelissa.com/travel agent. And it's an FAQs, and it answers any question you might have about being a travel agent, whether you want to actually be a travel agent, or if you're like me, you just want to book yourself mostly, and how the whole system works. And I help people plug into it. And now I'm actually helping people, teaching them how to become a travel agent. And that's been really exciting and interesting to me as well. And seeing people launch new entrepreneurial ventures and to help them along that journey is really cool.
Well, I'm a relatively new travel agent, so I will make sure that I go to profmelissa.com and read your FAQs. But I'm more interested in definitely before my next cruise, I'm going to go to your site and read about casino deals because that's something I do hear occasionally from guests, and it just seems far away, unreachable, and it's probably a lot. You've kind of made it sound like it's not all that difficult to get your arms around. So I might start with a visit to your site.
My YouTube video is the best, because I'm like, all the questions people always ask me, I'm going to put it in one video. So it's 30 minutes, everything you need to know.
All right. If you think about it, send me a link and I'll put it in the show notes. Well, Melissa, thank you for coming on the Joy of Cruising podcast. All the best to your relatively new adventure, Prof. Melissa, as a former educator and in the field, pretty much the same that you're in now. I know that you will do well. You will continue to do well, both in your educational pursuits and your travel pursuits. Thank you so much for coming on. And as we like to say, we'll see you on the ocean.
Thank you, Paul.
The Joy of Cruising and Cruising Interrupted, each $16.99 plus shipping, and new release, The Joy of Cruising Again for $18.99, can be ordered at the link on thejoyofcruisingpodcast.com. For each of the 3 books, use the discount code Joy of Cruising Podcast and get $4 off. The Joy of Cruising books are also available at Amazon. Order the ebook at Amazon or your favorite online retailer. Stay in touch by joining the Joy of Cruising Podcast Facebook group or following the Joy of Cruising Podcast on Instagram. We're constantly adding new shows. Please leave a review and tell a friend about us. We hope you enjoyed this brief escape to the ocean. See you next week.